Long ago, when the world was still learning how to dream, there lived a fairy no larger than a sparrow's heart. Her name was Tela, and her wings were made of the thinnest slices of dawn. While other fairies spent their nights painting the undersides of mushrooms or teaching baby bats lullabies, Tela walked the forest paths alone, with a spool of raw light slung across her shoulder like a traveler's satchel. She was the last lantern weaver. Every evening, she wove new globes of gentle radiance and hung them along the winding trails of the whispering woods, so that no creature, no matter how small or lost, would ever have to walk home afraid. The owls called her lanterns Tela's promises, because once you saw one glowing, you knew the way would open. But one October dusk, the sky forgot its oldest promise. The moon did not rise. At first, the creatures thought it was shy, hiding behind a cloud. Then the clouds drifted away and the truth settled like frost. The moon was gone, stolen, snuffed, erased. Darkness thicker than velvet, darker than the inside of a buried seed, poured into every corner of the woods. Tela's lanterns guttered and went out, one by one, as though someone were pinching their wicks between invisible fingers. Fireflies dropped from the air like falling sparks. Even the stars dimmed, ashamed of their own feebleness. In the sudden black, panic bloomed. A fawn cried for its mother and could not hear an answer. An old badger stumbled into the river and nearly drowned in water he had crossed every night for 70 years. A child from the village on the forest's edge wandered past the last oak, calling for her cat, and no one could find her. Tela flew to the great hollow oak, where Grandmother Spider kept her library of nightmares and memories. The ancient spider greeted her with a voice like dry paper folding. "The Nothing King has taken the moon," she said. "He lives beyond the edge of stories, where even dreams refuse to go. He is older than darkness and hungrier than winter. Every light he steals becomes a medal on his cloak of absence. If the moon is not returned before the first snowdrop opens next spring, every light that ever learned how to shine will forget the trick of it forever. The world will become a place that never knew morning."
Whiskers?
Tela's wings trembled, but not with fear, but with decision. "Then I will go to him and offer a trade." Grandmother Spider clicked her mandibles. "He has never traded. He only takes. I will bring him something he has never been given, a light that wants to stay with him." The spider studied the small fairy for a long time. At last, she spun a single silver thread and tied it around Tela's wrist. She whispered, "This will lead you home, no matter how far nothing stretches." So began the longest night of Tela's life, a night that lasted an entire year. She flew first to every corner of the whispering woods, gathering what scraps of light still dared to exist. From the last firefly brave enough to glow, she coaxed a bead of molten gold. From the blind mole who found his way by the warmth of the earth's heart, she borrowed a pulse of underground red. From the tears of a willow who had watched centuries of lovers part, she caught prisms of silver sorrow. From the laugh of the child who was still lost somewhere in the dark, carried on the wind, she bottled a single note of pure, ridiculous joy. Wherever she went, creatures pressed their own tiny lights into her hands. A fox offered the ember of his cleverness. A night-blooming cereus gave one petal of moon-colored fragrance. An old storyteller owl plucked a feather that still remembered starlight. By midwinter, Tela's satchel hummed and weighed more than she did. Spring tried to come, but without the moon, the seasons themselves grew confused. Flowers opened and froze. Birds sang the wrong songs. The lost child was found at last, curled asleep beneath a hawthorn, dreaming of cats made of moonlight. Tela kissed her forehead and left a tiny lantern burning so the girl would wake to softness instead of terror. Then she turned her face toward the edge of stories. Beyond the last tree, the world simply stopped. There was no ground, no sky, only a gray wind that smelled of unwritten endings. Tela tied Grandmother Spider's silver thread to a root that might have been imagination and stepped into the nothing. The journey cannot be measured in miles. It is measured in memories you have to surrender to keep walking. First, the nothing tried to take the sound of her mother's voice. Then it tried to steal the color green. Then it reached for the word home. Each time Tela felt something slipping, she opened her satchel and let a little of the gathered light spill out. The gold, the red, the silver sorrow, they burned like breadcrumbs behind her, keeping the thread alive, keeping her Tela. At last she reached the Palace of Un. It was not built, it was the opposite of building. A vast absence, shaped like a castle with towers made of missing bells and windows full of never-was. In the throne room sat the Nothing King. He was tall and thin and terrible, dressed in a cloak sewn from every eclipse that ever frightened a child. His crown was a ring of dead moons. In one hand, he held the stolen moon like a snowball packed too tight. Tela landed on the black floor and bowed, small as a moth. "I've come to trade," she said. The Nothing King's voice was the sound a heart makes when it forgets why it beats. "I do not trade, I take." "I know," Tela answered. "That is why I brought you something different." She opened her satchel and began to weave. Her fingers moved faster than sorrow, slower than forgiveness. She wove the firefly's stubborn gold with the mole's underground heartbeat. She braided the willow's tears with the child's bottled laugh. She threaded the fox's cleverness through the serious petal until it smelled like midnight about to turn into dawn. All the while she sang the oldest song the forest knew, the one mothers hum to children who are afraid of the dark. It has no words, only the promise that night is not the end of the story. As she wove, the throne room began to change. The black floor reflected tiny glimmers. The dead moons in the crown flickered, ashamed of their own feebleness. The lantern grew between Tela's hands, no larger than an acorn, yet big enough to hold every morning that had ever dared to arrive after a terrible night. When it was finished, it did not merely shine, it waited. It chose. Tela held it up. "This light is yours, if you give me the moon. It will never leave you, it will never fear you. It will sit inside your chest where nothing has ever stayed, and it will keep you company for as long as you keep it." The Nothing King stared at the small, glowing sphere. He had stolen starlight, bottled dawn, murdered 1,000 moons, but no light had ever asked to stay with him before. He looked at the moon in his hand, cold, heavy, beginning to crumble at the edges. He looked at the lantern, warm, patient, humming with borrowed heartbeats. Slowly, carefully, he placed the moon into Tela's outstretched palms. It was heavier than grief, yet she carried it as though it weighed nothing at all. In exchange, the lantern drifted across the emptiness and settled against the Nothing King's ribs. For the first time in forever, a soft gold glow burned where a heart could have been. The Nothing King closed his eyes. A single tear, black as space, bright as a newborn star, rolled down his cheek and became the first new moon in a year. Tela bowed once more and turned home. She flew for another whole season, following Grandmother Spider's silver thread through storms of forgetting and blizzards of almost. When at last she crossed back over the edge of stories, spring remembered how to be spring. Snowdrops punched through the earth like tiny trumpets announcing her return. Tela climbed the sky on wings that had grown thin and radiant as frost. She placed the moon gently back into its cradle of night. It rolled into place with a sigh of relief and blazed brighter than ever, as if it had missed being seen. The forest woke beneath a flood of silver. Lanterns rekindled themselves along every path, fireflies rose in spirals of celebration, the owls hooted wedding songs to the dawn. And far beyond the edge of stories, in a palace that was learning how to exist, a small, steady lantern glowed inside the chest of a king who had finally been given something he did not have to steal. Every year after, on the night the moon is darkest, a second light appears beside it. Tiny, warm, unbreakable. The fairies say it is Tela's lantern, still shining across the void, still keeping its promise. Because the bravest light is not the one that has never known darkness, it is the